Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.
And the U.S. Marine Corps officer who was relieved of his command for publicly chastising military leadership over the Afghanistan withdrawal is now in the brig. Some of his last Facebook posts indicate he knew jail was coming.
The Marine Corps confirmed Tuesday that outspoken Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Scheller is in the brig, a military confinement facility for pre-trial prisoners. Scheller became widely known after posting this video online late August, in which he criticized senior military leadership and called for accountability over the handling of the Afghanistan withdrawal.
Did any of you throw your rank on the table and say, hey, it's a bad idea to evacuate Bagram Airfield, a strategic air base, before we evacuate everyone? Did anyone do that? And when you didn't think to do that, did anyone raise their hand and say, we completely messed this up? I have been fighting for 17 years. I am willing to throw it all away to say to my senior leaders, I demand accountability.
The day after he released the video, Scheller was relieved of his command. Following that, Scheller announced he was resigning his commission and giving up a $2 million pension. He then went on to post several other videos criticizing military leaders. He later said he'd been ordered to undergo a mental health screening. In a statement, a spokesman for the U.S. Marine Corps Training and Education Command said Scheller is currently in pre-trial confinement, pending a preliminary hearing. According to Task and Purpose, Scheller's accused of contempt towards officials, willfully disobeying a superior commissioned officer, failure to obey an order, and conduct unbecoming an officer. On Saturday, Scheller wrote on Facebook that he'd been ordered to stop posting on all social media, an order he instantly ignored by posting about the gag order. The officer ended one of his last posts by indicating he expected to be sent to the brig, writing, "What happens when all you do is speak truth and no one wants to hear it? But they can probably stop listening because I'm crazy, right? Colonel Emil, please have the MPs waiting for me at 0800 on Monday. I'm ready for jail." The TCOM spokesman said that the date and location of the proceedings haven't been determined and that Scheller will be afforded all due process.
Vaccine mandates remain a controversial topic, even extending into sports. Recently, an NBA player was denied a religious exemption, making him ineligible to play home games in San Francisco until he becomes vaccinated per the city's requirement.
During Monday's Golden State Warriors Media Day press conference, Andrew Wiggins, an NBA professional basketball player for the Golden State Warriors, says he will continue to stand by his beliefs regarding the COVID vaccine.
I'm just going to keep fighting for what I believe, and whether it's one thing or another, get a vaccination or not get a vaccination, who knows? I'm just going to, keep fighting for what I believe, and what I believe is right. What's right to one person isn't right to the other, vice versa.
Wiggins has declined to discuss his vaccination status or about any conversations he has had with his team.
It's none of your business. That's what it comes down to. I don't ask you guys about your beliefs. I don't ask you guys what you think is right or wrong.
He says he has been given some rules to follow when in the team's facility, but did not disclose any further details. Wiggins sought a religious exemption for the vaccine. On September 24th, the NBA denied Wiggins' exemption request. He may be ineligible to play home games at the Chase Center in San Francisco until he meets the city's vaccination requirement. The Warriors' general manager, Bob Myers, said players' vaccination statuses are personal and private. The NBA does allow unvaccinated players to play this season, provided they test daily on practice, travel, and game days. Wiggins is expected to have a base salary of $31.5 million for the 2022 season. The 26-year-old is entering his 8th NBA season. The Warriors' first regular season home game is scheduled for October 21st against the Los Angeles Clippers.
And last Friday, we reported on a viral video of people tearing down explicit posters in New York City subway. Now we have a chance to talk to one of them and hear more about what drove her to take such a bold action. NTD's Arian Pazdar has that story.
I don't know, for kids to be looking at this, is that okay?
No, it's not. It's wrong.
This is propaganda.
These people are tearing down ads from a dating app, which many find too explicit to be shown in public.
So I think the only reason why this video went viral is it's because it's a conversation that I think people are ready to have.
Carew used to be a journalist. Now she's an activist, holding rallies in New York City to speak about the things she thinks are wrong. For example, propaganda and the indoctrination of children. Another thing is the suppression of speech, which reminds her of the time she spent in China.
China is like a golden cage, is how we would translate it, where on the surface it seems safe, it seems comfortable, but you're not free. You're not free to say what you want to say.
She also points to strict government control in China. One thing that especially stuck with her was a public restroom. She had to scan her face in front of a machine there in order to get toilet paper. She said when she tried to get more, the machine refused.
So what are some of the similarities that you're seeing in New York right now compared to what you saw in China?
Well, China is a culture that's really based on like America is about justice and justice, is a justice and justice culture. In Asia, it's a lot of shame culture, and in order to keep people in line. And I'm noticing this shame culture creeping into the West.
She says she can already see shame culture in people who are afraid to speak their minds about pandemic measures imposed by governments.
Why are you guys putting on your mask? It's outside.
Carew is part of an organization called New York Freedom Rally. They're inviting people to come to New York City Hall every Monday at noon to protest government-imposed lockdowns. Ariane Pastar, NTD News, New York.
According to a French report, Confucius Institutes are facing a growing backlash around the world. Billed as educational programs, they're suspected of conducting espionage for the Chinese Communist Party. One of these institutes in France has received public funding, which stirred up controversy. NTD's David Vives has that story.
The Confucius Institute in Angers, France, will be given 40,000 euros by a regional council. Confucius Institutes are promoted as education centers for Chinese language and culture. They are run by Hanban, an organization under the Chinese Ministry of Education that promotes communist ideology and the agenda of the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP. The council's decision has been denounced by MP Guillaume Garot, who said the institute is a means of espionage for the CCP. Garot quotes a 650-page report released last week by a think tank attached to the French Ministry of Armed Forces, saying China uses networks to infiltrate foreign countries. According to the report, the Confucius Institutes allow the CCP to expand its influence and also serve as a way to build a network with local politicians. The institutes are mostly created within universities. The report also says the CCP then uses the institutes to reinforce ties with the universities. It proposes funding for the universities from Chinese groups, which allow the CCP to infiltrate the university, control the narrative on China, and even conduct espionage activities. According to the head of a local human rights association, the institute in Angers should not have received the funding.
Not all institutes are funded, but most of them receive about 35,000 to 40,000 euros from local politicians. There are so many associations, charities, and programs for the youth that have to shut down, and yet the institute received 40,000 euros. This is a shame.
Giraud said most of the institutes in France are funded half by public subvention and half by the Chinese Communist regime via Hanban. She added that in total, 17 institutes receive about 600,000 euros a year from public funds. But according to the military report, the institutes are facing growing opposition around the world due to their reputation for espionage activity.
The director of the Confucius Institute in Brussels was arrested 2 years ago because he was suspected to be a spy. He was allegedly there to recruit spies for the CCP and has been banned from the EU for 8 years.
Giraud says for years she sent letters to local politicians who support funding to the institutes, some of whom seemed friendly to the Chinese regime.
I would say I was met with a great silence from some of them.
But she says there's hope, as some cities and councils across France have suspended their funding to Confucius Institutes or even closed them. David Vives, NTD News.
Good news for American rural telecom carriers. For those that need to replace equipment from Chinese tech company Huawei, there's a program that will allow them to apply for funds to reimburse the costs. NTD's Tiffany Meyer has more on that.
The U.S. is shelling out big money to kick Huawei out of America's telecom network. Huawei is a Chinese tech giant, and it's also a top telecom equipment maker. But Washington says the company is a Trojan horse that spies for Beijing and has warned allies not to use Huawei's equipment. The U.S. also has its eyes on another Chinese tech giant, ZTE. Last year, the U.S. designated these two companies as national security threats to communication networks. But the problem is, removing their equipment from networks could cost a lot of money, over $1 billion. The high cost proves challenging for rural telecom carriers. So the body that regulates American telecom networks, the Federal Communications Commission, is lending a hand. It has set aside almost $2 billion to help rural telecom carriers replace the Chinese equipment. The reimbursement program will open this October, and carriers have until next January to apply.
Every registered voter in California will get a ballot in the mail for future elections. California's governor says voter participation has increased because of it. Locals shared their thoughts with NTD's David Lamb.
Assembly Bill 37 was signed by Gavin Newsom on Monday, which permanently requires a vote-by-mail ballot mailed to every active registered voter in the state. Constitutional and elections attorney Mark Moiser tells NTD he's concerned about maintaining voter rolls.
And as such, we're getting thousands of people who have moved from the state of California who are getting mail-in ballots. And the state of California is not checking with other states to actually see if these people are voting twice.
He believes the Secretary of State isn't doing an adequate job.
There's big problems with people who have passed away, and the counties aren't removing them from the voter rolls.
Voters still have the option to drop off their ballot or vote in person. Locals share their thoughts with NTD.
A lot of times we hear stories about where folks don't get an opportunity to make it to the polls due to work, school, or whatever it may be. But to have them conveniently mailed to you sounds great to me. I wish they mailed us one in Michigan.
You definitely get more ballots turned in. However, again, there's no way to verify that whoever mailed it in is the actual person. So again, it just leaves the way open to fraud, in my opinion.
But I would say a way to alleviate that would be maybe to have voters send in certified mail, just to add more security behind it.
Officials said that voters vote when they get a ballot in the mail. This change comes after the recent recall against the governor.
I am actually a fan of Gavin Newsom, but I do disapprove of the only mail-in bill because I think it's important, especially I personally like to take my ballot over to the polling place and drop it in the box myself so that I know it's counted.
I think it's terrible. I don't think that's right. I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's a good idea, and it will cause a lot more problems than it will solve.
And I support universal mail-in voting in California, and I would like to see it in every state. In fact, I like the Australian model where it's law that everyone must vote.
California, the nation's most populous state, joins several other states in a similar measure, including Utah, Colorado, Washington, and Oregon. David Lamb, NTD News, California.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Don't forget to catch all of our programs on TV. NTD Evening News is on every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Find your local NTD channel at ntd.com/TV.
Everything that's reported on television isn't always true, but it should be. NTD, the power of truth. Now available 24/7 on television and streaming platforms.